the chair of the board of the BCLNA, and have been on the board for the past 5 years. Before we get started, I do want to let everyone know that we will be recording the session. So if you have any concerns with that, please let us know. And we will turn the recording off for the Q&A period. And then the questions will be noted and shared in the Japanese Beetle update. If we could all kindly mute our microphones as we get started here, and then as questions arise, we can use the little hand to raise our hand, or we can wait till the Q&A period at the end. So we want to recognize and appreciate all the landscape and horticultural professionals that are working within and around the regulated areas, who continue to remain diligent and committed to the program. All of us working together, landscapers, industry organizations, professional horticulturists, and government are needed to reduce the spread of Japanese beetle and eradicate it in and around BC. Our speakers for this evening are Jason Crandall, and Jason has been with the CFIA since 2016 and works on the Japanese beetle and other plant and health surveys and shipborne dunnage. Jason has been an active member of the CFIA's Japanese beetle response for the past several years, and he'll be giving a brief overview of Japanese beetle and the response to date, talking about the CFIA's surveillance activities and providing an update on movement controls and regulatory changes. So thank you, Jason. Tracy Hueppelsheuser. Tracy, I apologize if I got your last name wrong there. Entomologist with BC Ministry of Agriculture and Food will then update us on the treatment plan for private and public lands for 2023. And then we'll have a Q&A session with Jason and Tracy, joined by Sophie Desereau from Vancouver. I think, Melinda, you said Melanie won't be on from City of Burnaby, so we'll look to have you on the Q&A there. And Scott Walmsley with Port Coquitlam, sorry, Scott, if I got your name wrong there, to answer questions on the changes and the disposal options. So again, thank you to everyone for joining. I know it's in the evening, so appreciate your time and your diligence to this program. So thank you again, and I would like to hand it over to Jason, and I believe Corinne's going to put the slide deck up. So thank you again.
Corinne, if you can hear me, I'm actually good to run my own slides. That's okay with you. Okay. Just 1 second, I'll share my screen. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, you bet, Jason. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to do an overview of the program so far. I'm Jason Crandall. It says I'm a regional program officer. That's mostly true. That's the old title. Now they call us inspection advisors, but it's the same thing. Dan won't be joining us tonight, so it'll be just me. And here we go. So the agenda, like I said, I'm going to do an overview of the distribution and biology here in Vancouver. And then I'm going to talk about our surveillance program and how that works, and what we do, and our results over the last 5 years. And then we're going to go into the more regulatory stuff and talk about movement restrictions and what that means and changes from last year to this year. So what is Japanese beetle? Well, it's a scarab beetle native to Japan. It's an invasive species, quarantinable and regulated pest in Canada. It was first introduced to North America in 1917 in New Jersey on the East Coast, and it's been slowly kind of creeping westward ever since. It has 4 life stages, like most beetles do. We've got egg, several larval instars, and then a pupa and the adult. Both the adult and the larvae feed and cause damage, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. But if you look at the little calendar infographic thing down there, you can see the life cycle. Starting with the adult, a female adult Japanese beetle can lay about 60 eggs in the top few centimeters of the soil. They do that near the end of the summer into the fall. Those eggs hatch, and the first few larval instars feed on the roots of turf. As it gets colder, those larvae go down, they dig down as deep as 30 centimeters, and they go into diapause, which is just a type of hibernation, and they stay there over the winter, and they're dormant. When it starts to warm up, those beetles come up through the soil back into the root zone. They resume feeding. They finish their final instar. They pupate. And then right about June, they emerge as adults. And the life cycle starts all over again. So here's a map of the regulatory status of all the provinces and states in North America. The USDA and CFIA kind of got together and decided what regulatory status each place would have, and that really just indicates to what extent the beetle is present in those places. And through that status is how we kind of regulate domestic and international movement of mostly horticultural goods. So you can see, yeah, it's fairly well established on the East Coast there. But what's notable here is that British Columbia is the only Canadian province that is considered a pest-free area, indicated by orange there. So, you know, if we want to keep on going in kind of a Japanese beetle-free way with less regulations and bureaucratic stuff for everybody, we want to maintain that status, and that's what this eradication program is all about. So why is it regulated? Well, as I said, it's a fairly damaging invasive species. The larvae, I'm sure we're all familiar with the European shaper. It's very similar to that. You know, with C-shaped grubs under the turf, causing damage, brown spots. You've seen it all before. Same idea, but what's different about Japanese beetle is the adults feed as well, and they're quite voracious. They skeletonize the leaves of many different plants, and you can see the potential here for economic damage in a number of different ways. And we'll touch on that a little bit later too. But these pictures are good examples of exactly what it's capable of. Well, I mentioned it's a voracious feeder, and that's certainly true here in Vancouver. We've got a lot of juicy plants that it really loves to feed on, and all of its favorites are here in abundance. You know, Japanese maple, elderberry, Crinus malus rubus, vaccinium, you name it, we've got it. One thing that we kind of observed here in Vancouver is that Persicaria seemed to be a fairly common host. We saw feeding on that quite often in Vancouver, but overall it attacks easily 300 different species of plants, and it doesn't seem to have too much of a host preference. So here's a slide about the potential consequences as I mentioned. Establishment in British Columbia, it's going to have a lot of impact to our horticultural and agricultural sectors. Big economic impact, both through damage, but also through the regulatory control. You know, you're going to have to get on a program, or, you know, have things inspected a little bit more closely, additional declarations on your paperwork, all kinds of things. But also an additional cost, not only to industry, but municipalities, public, because, you know, you're going to want to control it in the same way that you're probably controlling European shaper. You know, whether it's setting up additional infrastructure to get on a program so that you can export to the United States, or just the cost of applying a celebrant to keep things in check. So you can see in these pictures here, if the issue gets out of hand, we can easily see a large population establishing itself. These pictures are from a place where it already exists. This is not Vancouver, but, you know, just throughout the course of a day, you can accumulate a fairly large number of beetles in a trap, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So that's a good segue to talk about the surveillance program. I'll just skip the next slide here. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency has done surveillance for Japanese beetle for many, many years. And in 2017, we detected it. And we run that survey from June to October, roughly. We have so many traps to set out. We really try to start in April, actually. And by the time we collect them back in, it's in November. But we aim to collect that biological data when the beetle is flying, so we get that first emergence and really where the population is and that kind of stuff. So that flight period in Vancouver is June 15th to October 15th. We make sure our traps are out by then. We check them every 3 weeks starting now. But there's a lot of high-risk sites that we would place traps at. Whether that's a place where we know the beetle is already present, or whether it's a place that could suffer impact from the presence of the beetle, and we want to make sure that we detect it early if it does show up. So those high-risk sites, we check them a little bit more frequently than once every 3 weeks, just to be sure. So here's a picture of all the different types of traps that we have. They all essentially work the same way. They have some fins at the top, followed by a funnel that leads down to a collection cup. And you can see that the collection cup varies in size and shape, but the form and function is largely the same. And the collection cup can even look like a bag. And we are using every single trap that you see in this picture this year. We use all of these different designs, and they all seem to work. So we deploy them as needed. And at the top right corner there, you can see the lure. It's a dual lure. You can see the two components. There's a puck and a rubber septum. One's a floral cue that indicates, the food is present and draws the beetle in, and the other one is a sex pheromone. So we've got kind of a double whammy. A very effective lure. We peel the back off like it's a packet of Dunkaroos or something, and then you stick it on the fins. The beetle flies towards the fins. It crashes into the fins. When it hits that barrier, it closes up its wings. It drops down through the funnel and into the collection cup. When the beetle flies, it can't really take off straight up vertically like a helicopter. It kind of has to take off more at an angle. So it can't fly straight up out of the trap, and it's difficult to climb out as well. So it's essentially trapped and stuck, and just bumbles around in there until we come and collect it and count it, and we have that data. And here it is. Here's the data. So I like this graph a lot. It really tells us a lot of different things. So the blue bar is the total number of traps that we set out that year, followed by the green bar, which is the number of those traps that detected a beetle. And then the red line is the total number of Japanese beetle detected in the lower mainland in our survey. So you can see we had a huge spike in the population. That was our real peak Japanese beetle in 2018 there. We set out 2,088 traps. 98 of them caught 8,000 beetles, roughly. So that was pretty significant. But what is also significant is that we've seen a major decline in the population in every year subsequently, except for last year. We did see a slight increase in population. It went from 79 in 2021 to 201 in 2022. And that is really representative of what's going on in Port Coquitlam right now. That's kind of our new epicenter for Japanese beetle. That's where we found the most of them last year. But what we can learn from this graph also is that we know what we're doing is working. We had a pretty big problem in Vancouver and quite a few beetles to deal with, but through movement controls and pesticide applications, we were able to get a handle on that and go from 8,000 to 201. That's still a win, and if we just keep our foot on the gas, we'll keep seeing results, I think. So here's what a survey plan looks like. This was 2022 survey plan. And these different colors just represent different densities of trout. So they get as dense and as close together as 49 trouts per square mile, which is indicated by the red. And out in the valley, you see 1 trout per square mile, you see half a trout per square mile. So it really varies, and we use previous year's survey data to inform these decisions. We concentrate our efforts in high-risk areas, not just where the beetle is, but where it could be, and places that are at risk for movement or proximity to current populations. So the 2023 survey looks a little bit different than this, and we've really expanded the survey through the Tri-Cities. There's a much higher density there now, as well as pit meadows and a portion of North Surrey as well, and that's really just because of proximity to Fort Coquitlam. But we've made minor adjustments year to year, and that's really informed by the data that we get. We're looking to set about 6,000 traps. It's pretty close to what 2022 is. It's just we just kind of redistributed them to support, the data that we saw at the end of 2022. So in addition to the survey, we also imposed regulatory controls, and we're going to talk about that in depth in the last half of this presentation. But this is an example of a sign that you might see when you're entering a regulated area. And yeah, it's just an example of how we kind of help people understand where they are and indicate that they're in a regulated area and things like that. And we'll go over movement controls in a minute. But just a little bit of background on that first. Initially, the regulatory stuff was kind of held together by a ministerial order, and that allowed us to regulate a broader range of materials within the regulated areas that we created. But last year, or sorry, at the beginning of this year, the ministerial order was revoked, and that's because we felt that we could have a handle on the risk without regulating so many different things. And we could do that with the Plant Protection Act, and we could do that with our directives and the powers that we already have. So we didn't need those expanded powers from the ministerial order, so it was revoked. And now we're just under the act and our directive, which is D9615. Which we also revised to reflect the current situation. And anyone can read our directives. If you Google D9615, there's also a link to it on our website. That's a good place to start if you're looking to do some homework and learn more. So these regulated materials really only apply to things within the boundaries of the regulated area. And it's meant to sort of arrest the human-assisted movement of Japanese beetle, which is really the primary way that it moved around. So, we used to regulate soil, we used to regulate green waste. That's all changed. Now, the focus, which we think is the highest risk pathway for movement, is plants with soil or soil-related that are attached to them, and we'll go over that in detail. But first, this is what our current regulated areas look like. Again, it's different than in 2022. We've expanded the Vancouver regulated area south and east, I think. And the Burnaby regulated area is also expanded, and we've created a new regulated area in Fort Coquitlam. So just a closer look at those. And we have an interactive map on our website that you guys can check out and take a closer look if you're not sure where you are. If you live in one of these areas, if you're going to be working in one of these areas, highly encourage you to take a look at these maps for yourself. But this is the Burnaby one. It's the smallest regulated area. It's got the Rosen Highway kind of running through the center of it. And then Port Coquitlam, which is, quite frankly, most of the municipality with a few exceptions. And Vancouver, which is a pretty large chunk of Vancouver that we've expanded south, kind of around Point Grey, golf club and things like that. That's East 40 or West 49th. That's kind of the new boundary. So what does this mean? What do these boundaries represent? Well, I kind of think of them as it's like any sort of biosecurity that you would see in a lab or a greenhouse, where you can go from clean to dirty, but you can't go from dirty to clean. So you can go into the regulated area. You can bring things into the regulated area, and that's fine. And you can move within the boundaries of the regulated area, and that's fine too. And there's no restrictions or paperwork required for that. But it's the movement of regulated articles, which again is plants with soil and soil-related matter attached, and they're going to say it a lot. That's if you want to move those out of the regulated areas, that's when the restrictions apply, and you may need a movement certificate. So again, regulated articles include plants with soil or soil-related matter attached, and the movement of those articles requires a movement certificate outside of the regulated area year-round. Before we go too deep, some definitions. Soil-related matter. It's a pretty broad definition. Humus, compost, earthworm castings, plant-related debris, either individually or in combination. That's what we consider soil-related matter. And substantially free from soil, which is going to be a significant definition. Not as broad. We consider them substantially free from soil when articles have been cleaned, brushed, shaken, or washed free from soil, and the maximum size of any individual clump of soil remaining on the material is less than a half an inch. Wait. Hello?
We can still hear you.
You can still hear me? I lost
Yep.
my screen for a second.
Oh.
I'm not sure what's going on. Sorry. Something
No.
happened. Technical difficulties.
Do you want me to share? I think I still have it open.
Yeah, let's do that. Because
All right.
yeah, something happened. PowerPoint crashed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, perfect timing, right?
All right. I don't know if you're seeing the presentation view.
No, it's not full screen.
Okay, let's see. It does give me that option. There we go. Center mode. See, still don't think it's working, but we will do this.
Yeah, perfect.
I believe that's where we are.
One more.
One more. Here we go.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right. Sorry, everybody. Yeah. So as long as it's been washed clean or shaken clean or brushed clean or whatever, and the remaining clumps are less than a half inch across, we would consider that substantially free from soil. Next slide. So the important thing to remember here is that the regulated article is plants with soil related matter attached. So if you remove the soil, it removes the requirement. If you make that thing substantially free from soil as per the definition, it's not regulated anymore. You don't need a movement certificate. It's really when soil is attached to the above ground plant part. That's what we're most concerned about. But as a matter of course, we just like to promote best practices. So we recommend that people always check for adult beetles on the plants, especially if it's within that flight period of June 15th to October 15th. We have no requirement for that. We're really just concerned with the removal of soil and whether it's attached or not, and if that's regulated. But Just as best practices, it's always good to check, shake them. You know, they tend to drop if they're jostled around. So I always recommend doing that. Next slide, please. Okay, just a little summary here. So yeah, regulated articles are plants and soil or soil related matter attached only, and it's year round. That includes potted plants, that includes turf, grass, sod, ornamental grasses, plants you're going to relocate, or plants you're going to throw away. If there's soil attached to those above ground plant parts or attached to the roots, it's regulated. If you remember the life cycle from the beginning of the presentation, it's notable that any life stage could be present at any time of year. Eggs, larva, pupa, adult. You know, depending on the time of year, you might have one life stage, you might have multiple life stages. So that's important to keep in mind. That's why we regulate plants with soil attached year round. And a movement certificate is required to move those articles outside of the regulated areas. Next slide, please. So there is some exemptions. Anything that's, you know, unlikely to be infested with live beetle, whether regardless of life stage, if there's not a high likelihood of presence, we've kind of indicated some things that are lower risk or almost no risk. There's never no risk. But those articles can move freely out of the regulated area and do not require a movement certificate. They are not regulated, so we'll go through what those are. Soil alone, soil and soil related matter on its own, used to be regulated. That's how it was under the ministerial order. Now, when it's not attached to plants, not regulated. And the flip side of that is above ground plant parts such as clippings, cuttings, trimmings, anything that grew above the ground that's been cut free from the roots or, you know, soil not attached to it, again, not regulated. Any kind of potted house plant or potted plants that's been exclusively kept inside, especially during that Japanese beetle flight period, those are exempt. And below ground root systems that are substantially free from soil. So if you just have a big clump of roots and there's no soil attached, not regulated either, exempted. Next slide, please. Also not regulated, cut flowers, decorative branches. If they were commercially produced outside of a regulated area and then brought into a shop to be sold within a regulated area, that's okay, not regulated. Fresh fruits and vegetables for consumption, not regulated. Compostable materials, so like green waste, food scraps, anything, again, substantially free from soil, including but not limited to grass clippings, pruning waste, branches with or without leaves, dying or dead plants. If it's substantially free from soil, it's good to go. And then articles transiting through. So say you're trucking down the low heat highway, you've got potentially regulated articles within your vehicle. If you are not stopping and you are just going right out the other side, that is okay. That is an exemption as well. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So our flight period is June 15th to October 15th. That's the high risk flight because adult beetles are flying the highest risk. You know, again, life stages could be present in soil that's associated with plants year round, but because of that, outside of that window, so from January 1st to June 14th, and then October 16th to December 31st, there are some potential exemptions for material within that PESB window as well. And we'll talk about those in the next slide, I think. Yes, so potted plants including ornamental grasses and nursery stock that enter after October 16th and then leave again before the flight period on June 15th, so leaving on June 14th. That is an exempted article. If it came from outside the regulated area, it went into the regulated area outside of the flight period and then left again before the flight period started up, it's fine. Next slide, please. So we've talked about regulated areas. We've talked about how things move around. We've talked about what's regulated. We've talked about what isn't. But when do you need a movement certificate? Well, it's important that you receive a movement certificate before you do the movement, not during or after, because that would be non-compliant with the regulations, unfortunately. So we have a 5-day business standard for issuing movement certificates, and that's indicated on our application form. We're very good at following that business standard. We always need it, and quite frankly, we frequently are under that. We usually issue movement certificates fairly quickly. So, if you provide yourself ample time and let us know you need a movement certificate, we can almost 100% of the time get it to you when you need it, well before you need it usually. If you're a retailer located inside a regulated area and you sell plants to people that are very likely going to take them outside the regulated area, we will give you a movement certificate that makes you compliant with the regulations, and then those regulated materials can be sold and those customers can take them away, and that's fine. And if you're a landscaper working, go back one more, please. Oh, yeah, too far. One more. Keep going. There you go. If you're a landscaper working in the regulated area and you need to dispose of things, so maybe you gotta take some stuff to the dump. You can't extricate the soil from the roots. Unfortunately, the stuff that you have is regulated and you need to dispose of it. That stuff needs a movement certificate to be disposed of. So we would issue that for you as well. But if you're not sure, maybe you don't know, you've got a unusual circumstance and you need our help. You've read the website, you're still confused, that's okay. Let us know. We've got a phone number you can call and an email address you can contact, and we're very good at walking you through it. We've become kind of a well-oiled machine at this point in terms of issuing movement certificates and helping people with movement controls. So we're more than happy to help you with that if you just give us a shout. Next slide. You don't need a movement certificate if we have conducted a site assessment. I think we talked about that a little lower, so keep that in mind. Site assessments that may exempt you from needing a movement certificate. If you're moving potted plants outside of that flight period, June 15th, October 15th, like you talked about a few slides ago, you don't need a movement certificate for that. And if you're moving things within, or if there's soil on its own, or if there's plants with no soil, none of that needs a movement certificate either. Next slide, please. So a lot of the times, maybe you're doing a lot of work and you're managing multiple sites and you're doing multiple movements and there's a lot going on. And it would be unreasonable for us to issue 20 different movement certificates on every other week or something like that. So we can issue you a movement certificate with an expiry date that covers the range of your work, or we can issue movement certificates that are good for up to a year that include multiple movements. So if there's a need to, frequently transport regulated articles to a location, whether it's for disposal or for other reasons, then we can issue certificates for that. We have a number of different ways of creating certificates that make you compliant regardless of your situation. So if you just let us know what you're doing and whether or not that's multiple movements or over a long period of time, there's space to indicate that on the application form, and we're more than happy to work with that. But just to ensure that you contact us prior to the beginning of your work so that there's ample time for us to go through that with you and issue the certificates as needed. Next slide, please. So the regulations have changed, as we've seen, you know, from 2017 to 2022. They were under that ministerial order, and now they're different. So if you had one of those long-standing, long expiry date kind of movement certificates that was issued in a previous year under the previous requirements, you do need a new movement certificate, and we are more than happy to provide you with an updated one. We will have guidance on that for you, and you just fill out the form and let us know what's going on, and indicate that it's you're looking for a reissue of a current movement certificate that you already have, and we're happy to do that for you as well. Again, there's our number, there's our email address. You're going to see that a number of times. It'll be on the screen at the end of the presentation as well, and we can put that in the chat for you too if you need. Next slide, please. Okay, site assessments. I mentioned that a few slides ago. Any site that has plants or soil-related matter attached to them that is inside the regulated area is eligible for a site assessment. If you think that there's something being done to mitigate the risk, or if there's some kind of special circumstance, or maybe the soil isn't really, you're not sure if it fits the definition of soil-related matter, it's really gravelly and rocky, we can take a look at that and let you know if you need a movement certificate or not. And if you don't, we'll provide that in writing that the site has been exempted from the movement requirements. The best thing to do if you're not sure, again, is to just call us, you know, and we can walk you through that as well. And if we think you need a site assessment after talking to you, you know, we'll point you in that direction, or we'll issue you a movement certificate as needed. And again, there's the number in the website for you. Retail. If you're a retailer located in a regulated area and those customers, your customers are going to be moving them out, again, give us a shout. Phone number, email address, either one. We have specific movement certificates for retailers that cover you for these circumstances, and yeah, case-by-case basis, we assess the situation and work with you to meet your needs. Next slide. So, excuse me. To get a movement certificate, you can go to our website, you click on Japanese Beetle in British Columbia. Under response activities, you go then to movement controls, and there's a button that says apply for movement certificate. It'll bring you to a form, and then you fill out that form and you email the copy of the form to the website indicated here. That website is also at the top of the form, so there's no mistake in it. Don't feel like you need to write it down. You need to find, or just give us a call and we'll help you through it. Next slide, please. So if you did need to dispose of something, typically that means deep burial, and you know, you can leave it on site. We have had people do that before. They kind of, if they're doing a big excavation, they'll just kind of deep bury their own stuff. Leaving it on site is fine. If you can separate the plants from the soil, that's going to really help you a lot, because then they're no longer regulated. But if you really can't do that, like a good example is sod or rolls of turf. It's really difficult, if not nearly impossible, to completely wash those free from soil. It's they're kind of one thing. So that is going to be regulated, and it's going to need to be disposed of if you're getting rid of it, and that's going to require deep burial. And we would let you know if that's the case when you receive your movement certificate. Next slide. Okay, so maybe you don't want to throw away your plant. Like maybe, you know, you're moving and you've been taking cuttings of your grandma's heritage apple trees, and you've got all these 3-gallon pots, and you want to take them with you. So you're going to take it, you're inside a regulated area, you're going to take it with you and plant it somewhere outside of a regulated area. It's not for disposal. Again, case by case basis, we can't, guarantee we're going to approve that movement, but my recommendation is always try to remove the soil, because that's really going to, again, remove the requirement. If you remove the soil, we can inspect it, issue a movement certificate, it's compliant, it's fine. There is a treatment option for containerized stuff. There are some limitations to that, so I would caution you to understand the requirements for the treatment option. But it is possible, but we will help you through that. If that's an option you'd like to explore, we can help you figure that out if that's applicable to your situation. But typically, a movement of plants for planting would require inspection. It would require removal of soil. If you contact us well in advance, that's the best thing to do, and we can take a look at it. You send us good pictures, or we send someone to the site, and we'll figure out how to get you what you need. Next slide, please. So I got to say, like with any regulatory stuff, there's always the potential for non-compliance. And if we do see non-compliance, we do have the authority to enforce the regulations as needed. Typically, we like to take an educational approach first. Outreach is always our first line of defense. But for really egregious non-compliances and repeated non-compliances, there is the possibility of fines, and we could take enforcement actions. So that's an important thing to note. It's never happened as of yet, but it is a possibility. Next slide. So there's a lot you can do, and attending things like this is a big one. Learning about the restrictions that are in place. We're super happy to have people come to this, and we love doing these talks and doing these outreach, and getting people in the loop about what's going on and what the restrictions mean and how it affects them. So do your best to learn about how this impacts you. Contact us, check out the website, check out the directive. You can just type it into Google, quite honestly, it pops up pretty right at the top. If you think you need a movement certificate, or if you're doing work within the regulated areas, before you start working, contact us. If you think you're going to need a movement certificate, get it sooner than later. We always recommend strong biosecurity practices. So I mentioned, shaking above ground plant parts before you move them or dispose of them, but also, clean your tools, clean your machines, don't move soil. Life stages are present year round. We no longer regulate soil, but human assisted movement is the main way that this pest travels. And anything that you can do to mitigate that, I think is always a good idea. And talk to your colleagues, spread the word, let them know where they can find us, give them our email address, give them our phone number. And also super important is report Japanese beetle if you see them. And we don't expect everybody to be a field ID of a Japanese beetle. If you think it's a Japanese beetle, take the best picture you can, send it to us. A lot of the times, I'll be honest, it's a stink bug, but I would rather see 100 stink bugs a day than one Japanese beetle. That's just me, but send us your pictures. We love reports. We love that people are interested and out there looking. The more reports we see, stink bugs or not, it just means that people are engaged and concerned and looking and out there, eyes on the ground. It's super helpful to us, and we love to see it. So if you do think you saw a Japanese beetle, there's a form for that, I think, or you can just email us your pictures, call us, we'll give you a call back. We have some guidelines for submitting photos, but do your best. We're pretty good at identifying insects. We've got a good team here, and we've been doing it a long time. So yeah, let us know if you think you saw it. Next slide. And that's it. So we'll take questions now. Again, there's the phone number. There's the email address. Mary Rose just dropped it in the chat. Visit our website for more information. Everything I talked about here today is laid out in detail on our website. And you can go through it and then ask us questions later, now, whenever you want. We're happy to help you. And that's my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate that. Sorry, Ross had to step out. But we can, maybe we'll take our questions at the end, because then we're going to do them all in that Q&A session, if we don't mind there, Adam. Write it down so you don't forget. Or you can put it in the chat and then it won't be forgotten. So what I'm going to do now is just hand it over to Tracy Hueppelsheuser, and who's entomologist, as Ross mentioned, with the Ministry of Agriculture, and she's been a great partner with us in this and other invasive species that we're dealing with. So really appreciate CFIA and the ministry's support in this. So over to you, Tracy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be here, and you can hear me okay? Yeah, I see some nodding.
No problem.
Good.
Yes, that's
okay.
good.
So I'm gonna try to share the right thing here. And let's see how I do. Okay, so hopefully you see the full screen now.
It's perfect.
Okay, awesome. That's great. So my contact information is there on the first page, and I just want to talk about the treatment program information on that side of things. And Jason has given us a good overview of some of the background, the biology, and all that. So I'll just go into treatment. So there we go. So there are a ton of people involved in the whole Japanese beetle initiative. And part of the reason there's so many players is because no agency held all the tools needed. So we have 3 levels of government. So there's some cities involved, as well as provincial government and federal government. We have non-government organizations like the BC Landscape and Nursery Association and the Invasive Species Council. And there's a couple of funders mentioned here, Investment Ag and the Canadian Agriculture Partnership, but just know that each of the partners have skin in the game on this. So it really takes a team on a project like this. Okay. So the goal of the program, of course, is to eradicate Japanese beetle from British Columbia. And, a project like this, you spend a lot of time and effort at the beginning in hopes of preventing establishment and preventing the spread of the pest, because it's actually cheaper to do it this way than it is to pay for the rest of our lives into the future for this. So we think it's an economical approach. So, okay, so the results so far, Jason has told us about this, but if you crunch the numbers, it's about over a 97% decrease in the number of beetles caught in traps over the years that we've been doing this, so from 2018 to 2022. And CFIA has a great story about this on their website, so check out their series of reports. They have the data there and everything, so you can check it out. So this tells us that our treatment, as well as the movement control and the outreach and communication initiatives are really working. So how do we measure treatment success? So trap catches in 2023 will show us if the treatments or how successful the treatments in 2022 have been. So what we're looking for is a decrease in numbers of beetles each year in the areas that are treated. So, so let's talk about the rollout and what the treatment program looks like. The treatment area is based on trap catches in 2022, and so that's determined over the winter. And then in late winter, we issue a notice to treat to the cities, and that happened on February 6th this year. And then treatments begin on public lands in April. Now, this is just an example of what the notice looks like. It's just a couple of pages. The first page is about what needs to be done, and then the second page is the map, which I'll show you in a sec. So, and the other thing that we issue each year is a letter to landowners, and this is for the private lands. And this one shows the city of Port Coquitlam, but it gives a quick summary of the Japanese beetle program. It is requesting the landowner's permission to treat, because though there's an order to initiate treatment on public lands, we're not issuing an order or notice to treat for private lands. We're asking people to treat voluntarily on their own private lands. And so this letter is a tool to help seek permissions to treat. And this is, what's useful for the landscapers or for people that work on the grounds or property managers to, just to try to help educate and inform and hope we get some allies in the private lands. And this is made available in several ways. Mail-outs from the city. Some of the cities include this in their mail-outs. Landscapers, certain landscapers who are assigned to each area, either mail these or do door drops to residences. And these letters are also available from BCLNA or on the Ministry of Ag website. So this is a map. So this is the second page of both the treatment notice to treat and also the landscaper or the letter to landowners. Okay, so the treatment area has changed over the years, depending on where the beetles were caught the previous year. And so I'm going to show you a series of maps that describes this, but basically we'll treat an area for about 2 years, once per year. And then once you get an area with no catches for 2 years, it's considered free from Japanese beetle and it's dropped from the treatment area. So there will be areas that were treated, say at the beginning, but we're no longer treating them. And I think that's really important to mention. So if you're a landscaper, you can't have a contract with a property for 5 years because they're likely going to be out of the treatment zone by then. They won't need the treatment for that long. Okay. So next, so I'm going to show you the series of maps, just showing the treatment area over time. It's kind of neat to watch how it changes. So this is from 2018, and all those orange bubbles are beetles were caught in the middle of those. So generally we put if there's a positive trap, we get a 200-meter buffer around the positive trap, and you end up with all these bubbles on the map. But you can see that there's a lot of bubbles around Falls Creek, right in the center of the map. And there's a few spots out here, but most of them are right around Falls Creek. And that was the year that over 800 beetles were caught that were mentioned in the nice graph that Jason showed. So this is 2019, and you can see there's still a lot of bubbles, the yellow bubbles, but there's not as many. It seems to be less spread out. So that's good news. And now I'm showing you 2020, the treatment area, because that's a combination of the trap catches from the previous 2 years I just showed you. So it looks kind of like the bubbles, but we've tried to catch it to the roads so it's easier for the applicators. but it covers Falls Creek and downtown and actually Stanley Park. So, and then when we go to 2021, and you can see the blue line designates the treatment area, and it's getting smaller. So that's good. That's good news. Now 2022, you can see the area around Falls Creek, the blue line is getting smaller and smaller. So more good news. And the greatest news of all is when we look at the Falls Creek area, the pink lines are the treatment areas. When we look at that area right there, there was only 2 beetles caught there last year. So we've gone from over 8,000 to 2 beetles. So that's a great news story. Okay, let's look at some of the other areas. Yes, we're still catching beetles in some other areas. And yes, unfortunately in Burnaby and Port Coquitlam. But the good news is we've been able to work away at that initial hotspot. So I just want to highlight, this is last year's map, and this is 2023 map, and you can see a big change in Port Coquitlam. So we did have more beetles in Port Coquitlam, so that's where a lot of our effort is focused in 2023. I'll just show you a little more close up here. We started using this GIS mapping approach a few years ago, and it's really made it easier to keep track of what's going on with all those land parcels. So teal just indicates, I'll just show you the color coding in here. Green, the dark green or bright green is mostly parks, and you can see that they've been treated. The pink line is the treatment area, and the blue mostly shows that it shows it's a parcel in the treatment area, but and the gray is no turf. So we're in the process of getting the data entered. So these maps aren't complete, but I just wanted to let you know what those colors meant. There's Vancouver, there's Burnaby. You can see lots have permission granted, but those will all be switching to green pretty soon because we're wrapping things up. And some of these are industrials, so they should all be gray, but it's just a nifty system for keeping track. Here's Poco. You can see that colors are changing in here, which is good news. And I want to mention Richmond. Richmond had only 1 beetle caught right here in the north part on Garden City Road. And the city treated the boulevards, but we had no private land treatments in there. We just did the boulevards, and the city was just being really proactive. So I just wanted to mention it today. So what do we use? Acelepryn. The liquid is our preferred. It's just been working out really well for us. High rate, high water, and the target is the newly hatched larva in the summer. So we put the product in the spring, and then it's there for the whole summer, and it kills the larva when they're young. We use some granular, and that is a broadcast formulation. It works fine on the lawns. We have some applicators that are using it, but it is also ideal for smaller, challenging locations, landscape beds, upper level turf. So that's also a tool that we're using. Now this is a group 28 insecticide. It has several pests on the label for turf and a whole bunch of other crops. It's a reduced risk product. It's it's very safe on non-targets and low application rate, so 1 to 2 grams per 100 meters squared of active ingredient, and a really high or low LD50, so greater than 5,000, which basically means it's essentially non-toxic. So what needs to be treated? Basically turf, solid turf, so boulevards, parks, even planter boxes, fence lines, and tree wells, wherever there's turf growing. Something like this, crushed gravel, it's a poor egg-laying site. We wouldn't need to treat this, for example, if there was no turf growing in there. So what the treatment schedule generally looks like is we do the parks sort of in April. and May, and then move into private lands and boulevards. And by the end of June, we tend to wrap things up. And this year, we're planning to finish by June 30th. If you're interested in looking at the treatment schedules for the cities have great websites describing the plan and more information. As I said, most of the work is already done, but it's good to look at it and just get a sense of what's happening in your city. So signage has been an important tool for us, and it's been worked out pretty well where we haven't needed to close the parks. Sometimes they are marked off, but not always. And signs have been critically important for keeping the public up to date on public lands. And here's some Vancouver signs, but also private lands where, yes, you have to put up your required notice of pesticide use, like is required for Ministry of Environment, but you also can use some informational signs, which are helpful to inform the public. So costs. So the cities cover the costs of applications on public lands, roadsides, boulevards, with a little help from the province, but mostly they handle it. And then private lands, so residential turf and so on, is covered by the province. So that's work that we do in collaboration with the landscape companies. And obviously the landowners who give permission for treatment. So the companies that did the treatments in 2023 or are doing the treatments in 2023, Paris-based landscaping and Bartlett tree experts. I just want to give a shout out to all these guys because they've been working really hard for us over the years and really contributing to the project. Bartlett and Paris-based have been involved since the beginning, and they are treating in all three main areas, Vancouver, Burnaby, and Port Coquitlam. And then we have 3 companies treating in Vancouver only, Cutting Edge, Neighborhood Lawn Care, and Louise Garden Services. So that has been working out quite well as well. How am I doing for time, Maureen?
No, or fine.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot to write down my start time. So the process for treatment of turf on private land. So we're mostly done for this year, but just keep this in mind for next year. So licensed applicators can have a conversation with me if they're interested in treating for the program, or if they have clients in the treatment areas that they think should be treated. It's up to the landscaper or the applicator to seek the permission to treat from the owner, manager, resident landowner. So that has worked for us for the last few years, and because we feel that the landscaping companies, they know the lay of the land, they have the clients, they have systems in place to reach out to the residents. So I think that's been a good way to do it. Once they get the permission, they offer a quote to the ministry for the work, and if it's in the treatment area and there's turf on the site, and I like I think their prices are reasonable, I'll approve it for the treatment in that area on that property. So once the work is done, the pesticide records are required in order for the ministry to pay, and once those are collected, then they can invoice the ministry for the work. So here's just an example from the Ministry of Environment's website. If your companies are doing treatments, you'll already have a system for this. If you're considering doing it, check this website out. This is a template. You don't have to use this one, but you do need to record this information in some way if you're doing pesticide treatments as a commercial business. So the plan for the upcoming years, well, trapping results in 2023 will determine the size and the location of treatment areas in 2024. We're hoping that our treatment areas continue to shrink because we're expecting our beetle numbers to continue to drop. And remember, 2 years of no beetles means an area is eradicated. So then that treatment zone can get pulled out of the program. So CFIA's annual surveys will continue as long as Japanese beetle is regulated, and the surveys are critical to the success of our treatment program and helping us to locate where the beetle is and know where to treat and to, do our treatments as efficiently as possible. So, and the good news is CFIA is going to continue these annual surveys even after our program is complete. Just that'll help us to keep an eye on things. So that's good news. So this is my last slide. I just want to encourage everyone to look at the information that's out there. We've got some great local information, and I actually made a QR code for the Ministry Japanese Beetle website. I tried it out with my own phone, and this little tool works to take you right to our website where you can read a quick overview of the response program. It talks about the treatment areas, and it has those letters to landowners for each of the cities on there. Talks a bit about biology, how to report, and where to get more info. So I'd encourage you also to look to our partners at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the city's websites, the Invasive Species Council of BC, and the BC Landscape and Nursery Association. And both Invasive Species Council and BC Landscape and Nursery Association have newsletter blasts that go out on a regular basis that will give you Japanese beetle updates. And I think those are a great little tool because they'll tell you if there's an update on regulations or anything like that. So I encourage you to sign up for those newsletters if you aren't already. And here's my contact information if you have any questions.